I want to be talking about this while we're looking at the, like looking at the CPI print going in. I think there's about 7 minutes left. So on that, like I know you guys are, doing a lot of research on the on-chain. Have you guys done any looking into kind of like the synergy between macro and crypto at all, or not really?
100%.
Okay.
I don't know if am I allowed to shill or mention any projects.
No, go ahead. No, no,
uh,
no, no. Yeah, it's like it's your ball. Yeah, yeah,
not to shill, but it's actually a problem that I think is really important because I think a lot of us have thought about stablecoins as something where obviously there's still a lot of risk, but that fundamentally these business models around things like real world assets or other things that are depositing into treasury bills out there in the real world. You've got 10-year treasury notes in the US at like what 4.6,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
4.7% or so. So if we are able to bring some of that assets into crypto, it's fundamentally something like it's like the world's A token or C token from Aave Compound that right now we're missing out on as a relatively low risk yield. And so I think that's also where inflation has generally actually still been higher than what these long-term 10-year rates are, which obviously puts the whole world at a fairly not so good case because they're effectively it's like rebasing tokens that we see in crypto, right? Traditional worlds are minting too much, printing too much money, and then obviously maybe not growing to the scale that they need to.
Mm.
But I think there's one project that we've been kind of looking into, which is called Trueflation.
Oh,
They
we see it.
actually basically offer some different CPI and other
Yeah.
data on to an on-chain Oracle. They I think work with Chainlink and some
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
teams to they put this data on chain. I think it's quite interesting to see more reference rates and other assets or price feeds and data feeds be brought into crypto
Mm.
because it means that then we can think a lot more of how these types of information feeds are relevant to what types of strategies we create. You could imagine some really crazy things like if I create like let's say some sort of uni v3 trading position someday, and I say I want a bigger payout if my stablecoin trading strategy outperforms the real inflation rate of the world, because then I'm doing something that helps protect you from the inflation that you would see if you just hodled your normal stablecoin,
Mm.
and maybe I get a lesser fee because I didn't generate enough fees for you.
Mm.
That would be really cool,
So
right?
like having
And
that,
so
having those some of those numbers as like defining high watermark rather than like the I guess like more mainstream adopted numbers. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, so like in a vacuum, right? I don't think you can only look at, oh, did I make money or did I beat BTC or ETH? Like those are relatively easier benchmarks. But in the long run, for the whole world, for crypto to try and really beat crypto scale or world scale, I think it's important to actually know, like, hey, am I building stuff that puts us in the level of investment outcomes that are relevant for bigger players. And I think in this last wave, obviously, we saw a lot of institutional participation, and I think not all of it was positive, right? I think we've seen a lot of this term mercenary capital and other folks that kind of came in just because there's value. But I also feel like fundamentally, if our space isn't creating value, we don't really deserve to grow in some way, right? Do I believe in crypto, DeFi, and decentralization in the long run? 100%. But in some way, growing too fast before we can handle that growth is also not something that is good for the sustainability of what we want to build, right?
Mm.
Um, and so to me, knowing what these types of rates are in the real world is important because it is a fundamental issue when Aave gives you only like 2% and then some guy in TradFi is comfy sitting in 4.7% somewhere,
Yeah.
right? He's just not going to move. And in the long run, do we want that guy to come into crypto? That can be a different question. But fundamentally, right now, we can't onboard him from giving him a better financial opportunity.
Mm.
And so that's something that I'm very keen to kind of think about. I don't like to just think about it purely as a macro number go up, right? Kind of thing. I don't think it's a pure kind of beta correlation thing where I think a lot of folks feel like, oh, if S&P 500 pumps, then the whole market pumps. There's definitely some piece of it. And I think that's where we've thought a lot about relative valuation, that obviously in the real world, if other things go up in value, then crypto looks undervalued relative to that and vice versa. And I think that's also something that we kind of see with all the different cyclicality of crypto too, that at some point we obviously feel like those like feed and greed indexes kind of illustrate how extreme some of the cycling that happens within our space. And I think it's up to us to try and find positive opportunities, whether that's from us as a launchpad, finding early stage projects, or for you guys like organizing these Twitter spaces and just having these conversations. I think these types of opportunities are exactly what we need to give to people in order to have them stay and participate within the ecosystem.